I'm not here to talk about the Notting Hill racial attacks, but that's just a bit of the background of what our people had to suffer in this country and are still suffering.
Hi there, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Colin here with you. Join me, let's go behind my time tunnel as we continue part 2, this time with Colin Bobb Semple and the Windrush inspired petition to Parliament. Hi there, welcome back. And we will continue our series, and this time I'll be bringing you the presentation of Mr. Colin Bobb Semple, entitled My Windrush Inspired Petition to Parliament. Conduct an urgent review of the Immigration Acts 2014 and 2016 that was held at a seminar. This seminar was at the Guyana Folk Festival here in the United Kingdom.
Now that we've heard such a wonderful presentation from Esther, I would ask you to hold your questions until the end. After my presentation, we can then have a discussion, questions, comments later on both presentations. I'd now like to present my little PowerPoints on the Windrush scandal. I have been inspired to do a petition to Parliament over this issue. I've been moved so much by what I've seen and heard in the press, in The Guardian and other reports, in Sky and other television reports about these terrible cases of mainly Caribbean people, including Guyanese. I didn't realize that Guyanese were included as well until I spoke to a few people and discovered that people from all over the Caribbean, Guyana, the Americas, but not only in the CARICOM region, but also from Canada, Australia, New Zealand. There are a few cases from other parts of the Commonwealth as well. But I'm not here to go into all those details. I'm going to focus particularly on Guyana, how it affects Guyanese. I'm dedicating this to my mother. She came to this country in 1957. A number of friends here knew my mom. Paula, Neil, and others. Aubrey, the panologist. Many of you knew my mom. She was a seamstress. She had a pretty good job teaching at NPC in home economics, but she thought it fit to come to this country for a new life, hopefully a better life. She came by ship, as I did as well afterwards, but she came in 57 and lived at first in the Ladbroke Grove area in North Kensington, Cornwall Crescent, and a few other addresses in the area. But at the time of the Notting Hill racial attacks in 1958, she was in that area where people were throwing bricks and bricks and bottles at people of African heritage at their houses in the summer of 1958. We know about Kelso Cochrane, who was stabbed by Teddy Boys, they say, in 1959. I'm not here to talk about the Notting Hill racial attacks, but that's just a bit of the background of what our people had to suffer in this country and are still suffering. However, you can see from this slide that British Guyana was a British colony. Guyana, prior to independence in 1966, 26th of May 1966, this is Independence Celebration Week, isn't it? 26th of May, Independence Day. But Guyana was a British colony. It was British Guyana, spelled Guiana. BG, as we call it. All right, for short. BG, and think about it, BG and GB. Right? Now, this was what our passport looked like. I had one of those. I still have it. One of those. You have one too. You have one too. And a number of us have got this passport. And it says British passport. British. When we traveled on that passport, we were British subjects, citizens of the United Kingdom and colonies. That's what it said. This is a copy. You can't see it very clearly, but the national status on my passport, my mother's passport, and on others, Aubrey's passport, British subject, citizen of the UK and colonies. Pre-independence, British colonial passport. All right? Moving on, as Esther says. I would like to pay tribute also to the numerous people from Guyana and the Caribbean, from the CARICOM region, if you will, from the Commonwealth, to the war effort from World War I. Over 700 Guyanese voluntarily enlisted, served overseas as members of the West Indies Regiment. There are websites, which have all of these. Thank goodness for the internet. So much is coming to light now through the internet, as you all know. An amazing amount of data and information is available to us. Look at, I've put a link here to the Guyana Times that talked about in the article on the 1st of March 2013, talked about the Guyanese contribution to the two world wars. In World War II, You remember Atkinson Airfield? Atkinson Airfield was built by the Americans in 1941 when the USA entered the fray of the war. They had bases in Guyana, Antigua, the Bahamas, and so on. Right? Now, the German U-boats were in the area in the Caribbean Sea, in the Atlantic, and so on. The German U-boats were there. So the Americans used the base in Guyana to battle against the Germans. And they transported troops from the West Indies and Guyana to other places, over to Africa and England and elsewhere in Europe. The airport, or the air base, is now the Chedijagan International Airport. Timeri, as it was called previously. Several Guyanese joined the RAF.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're excused. You'll pay a fine later. E.R. Braffett, or Braithwaite, the author of To Serve with Love. Remember the film, Sidney Poitier? E.R. Braithwaite, the teacher, was a fighter pilot in the RAF. Did you know that? He was a fighter pilot. Look at the website, www.Caribbean Air Crew, WorldWar2.com, etc. Cy Grant, the singer and actor, he was a flight lieutenant and a navigator. He was a prisoner of war, 1943 and 1945. Guyanese. Uncle Ronald Hall, the dentist, many of us knew. Perhaps all of us in this room knew Uncle Ronald. Ronald Hall, Dr. Ronald Hall, dental surgeon, Tulse Hill area. He was a flight lieutenant and a navigator. Did you know that he was shot down in the sea for 2 days? I never knew that he had endured that until I went on that website and I saw that. And I thought, my goodness, he never said anything about that. He did that for Britain, Guyanese. And you'll hear similar stories. When I look at the website, I see similar cases from Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, etc. There's a list of Guyanese who had volunteered and had served in World War II. And I'll run through them very quickly by surnames. Alves, Braithwaite, Clevier, Cross, Cunningham, De Freitas, De Silva, Dias, Faisal Karim, Gonzalez, Govaya, Cy Grant, another Grant, Griffith, Paul, Ronald, Haley, Edward, Harding, Oscar, Hoban, Luck, W.R. Luck, MacDougall, Miller, Dusty Miller, Way, Weston, Wood. Some of you will be familiar with those names. They served Britain in the war. Now, moving on, I come to the main topic. Empire Windrush? Well, we all know that the Windrush docked in Tilbury on the 22nd of June, 1948. A number of persons who came on that ship were ex-service men and women. Now remember that at common law, remember the national status, British subject. At common law, all British subjects, wherever they were born throughout the Commonwealth, had a right to come to the UK and live and work freely without let or hindrance. It says so in the passport. Without let or hindrance, to go freely through the UK. You were born in Nigeria, when you were born in Australia, when it was good, or New Zealand, or Canada, or British Guiana, or Jamaica, wherever. Whilst it was a colony, under the old English common law, and I quote MacDonald's, the Bible on immigration law. This is the Bible for immigration lawyers. Right? We have an immigration lawyer here, Simone Bowman. You recognize this book? The Bible on immigration law. We, from whatever part of the Commonwealth, were free to come and go as we pleased before statute law put the spanner in the works, before legislation. Because legislation, and this is the problem now, you see, legislation can override the common law, can supersede the common law. The common law can go out the window, you see, where you've got an act of parliament, which is supreme. Parliament is supreme. And that's the cause of the problem. No, because of the 2014 and 2018 acts. But I'll come to that in a minute. Just over a month after the arrival of the Windrush, the British Nationality Act of 1948, I talked about the legislation a minute ago, was the first piece of legislation that dealt with the question of confirmation of the common law rights. You know, it didn't erode the common law rights. It in fact enshrined in statutory form what was the common law. The fact is that the British Nationality Act established the status of citizen of the United Kingdom and colonies. For those who were born within the UK and the colonies after the commencement of the 1948 Act. Okay, so far so good. The Act, however, went into a number of hoops and tried to define who was a British subject and who was a Commonwealth citizen. But in section 1(2) of the Act, it said, well, British subject and Commonwealth citizen have one and the same meaning. So an Australian or a Guyanese or a Jamaican Commonwealth citizen, you're a British subject. We're all British subjects. Okay? All right. So as you can see from this slide here, it included citizens of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Union of South Africa, Newfoundland, India, Pakistan, Southern Rhodesia, and Ceylon. Now Sri Lanka, of course. Section 1(3) of the British Nationality Act, 1948. So the point I'm making here is that the Windrush issues extend to many other people who were born in states in the British Commonwealth and their descendants under the 1948 Act, right? Going back to the 1948 Act. So those, like my brother here, who was born around that time, or even before that time, you know, my elder brother here, my elder brother, who was born around 1948 or whatever, earlier, whatever. But the serious point is this: those born in those states, in all those countries in the Commonwealth, were British subjects. And they were Commonwealth citizens under the 1948 Act. Now the problem arose, in my view, in 1962. In 1962, we had the Conservative government, I think it was under Harold Macmillan, passed the Commonwealth Immigrants Act. After the Windrush, you see, after the 1948 Windrush ship docking in Tilbury, you had a number of ships coming in. And there was a lot of publicity every time a ship came in, and all these people, you see on television, they show the passengers disembarking. All so well dressed. Women with gloves, hats, guys in suits, suits. It was, look, they were in their Sunday best, weren't they? Coming to the mother country. Through the 50s and 60s, you had a wave of, I won't say immigration, I don't call it immigration. There were people who were coming home. There were people who were going to their mother country because they were told, we were taught in school, weren't we? You were taught. I was wrong after. we were taught in school. Rule Britannia, you will be going to the mother country. We were invited. Our parents were invited to come to work. Look at Barbados. The Barbadians were invited to come and run, and they came and they ran London Transport, British Railways, but and so on. But anyway, the 1962 Commonwealth Immigrants Act was passed in order to stem the flow of entrance. To stem the flow, I won't say immigrants, to stem the flow of people who were coming to their mother country. The streets of London were supposed to have been paved with gold. Dick Whittington, remember that? Those of you? Don't you remember that story? I remember at Browne, St. Mary's, RC, we were taught these things by the nuns and the priests and and the teachers. I learned in my history and in my lessons all about Big Ben and Westminster. You know what I look now and I say, Westminster. Oh, Houses of Parliament in Westminster. Since I was a child, I learned about all this. England, our mother country. But in '62, the government said, well, no, this must stop. We've got to introduce controls now. You will no longer be free to come in on your colonial passports without restriction. So they imposed restrictions on entry. It was then further extended in 1968. Another Commonwealth Immigrants Act, but that one, this time, was intended to address the East African Asians. Remember when Idi Amin was throwing them out of Uganda because they did not retain, or they did not apply for Ugandan passports, and from Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and so on, East Africa. They had the option to take the local passport citizenship or to go for the British. And most of them said, well, we're going for the, the black British passports, right? And a lot of the Asians banked in England. Okay. Commonwealth Immigrants Act passed in 1968 to impose controls now on the East African Asians. When they came, they were told, oh, you have not got a British passport issued in the UK. You've got a British passport issued overseas. And that's how they imposed the restriction. They distinguish between the British passports issued in the UK and to British people, in inverted commas, and the East African Asians with their CUKC passports, citizens of the United Kingdom and colonies passport. Anyway, restrictions in '68. In McDonald's, again, our Bible, there is a quote, you see, which says this was racist. This was, if I can find it, and I'll just quickly quote. Commonwealth citizens were first made subject to immigration control in the UK by the Act of 1962. This act was brought into force mainly as a result of a campaign against black Commonwealth citizens already here. The act made a distinction between citizens of the UK and colonies, CUKCs, and citizens of independent Commonwealth countries, and based control upon the kind of passport held by the would-be immigrant. Okay. I'll read a quote from further on. In short, CUKCs were exempted from control, except those who were born in Crown colonies and obtained their passports there. So you see, they drew a line between those who had their passports issued in the UK and those who had their passports issued in the colonies. This category of CUKC comprised, among others, large sections of the Asian community in Kenya, who had been expressly given the option of UK citizenship by the Kenya Independence Act 1963 on exactly the same basis as the European settlers. Moving on further, the Commonwealth Immigrants Act 1968 sought to change all this. Its aim was to bring the East African Asians under immigration control. Its method of controlling the Asians was to divide holders of UK passports into two separate categories. Those who could enter Britain without restriction and those who could not. Last bit of quote. Ancestral connection to the UK became the key factor determining which CUKCs were subject to immigration control. Now, what did the Asians do? They took the UK to the European Court, to the European Commission. And the International Commission of Jurists criticized the 1968 Commonwealth Immigrants Act. And again, I'm quoting from the book from McDonald's. The act, at the time of passing, said the International Commission of Jurists, was in violation of international law. In East African Asians and the United Kingdom, complaints by 25 applicants that their human rights had been infringed by the operation of the 1968 Act were held to be admissible under various articles of the European Convention on Human Rights. In particular, the Commission found as a fact that notwithstanding the neutrality of the language of the statute, it had racial motives and covered a racial group. It was said to have been degrading treatment. The 25 Asians took the UK to the European Commission on Human Rights. All right. So that was 68. We have since then had the Immigration Act of 1971. That is the bedrock of the immigration law of this country. The 1971 Immigration Act. Do you remember? I know my brother here, you will remember this. You remember this word patrial?
Yes.
Patrial and non-patrial?
You had to be a grandfather or something, or grandparent.
The Immigration Act of 1971 made that a part of the law. It distinguished between patrials who could prove an ancestral link to Britain as distinct from those of us who could not. So we are non-patrials. So what we had to do is register then as citizens. We had to register. Many of us had to register. And this is what the problem. I mention this because of the problem now. Some of our people didn't register, didn't naturalize, didn't do anything. Right? And now they are up a creek without a paddle, in a sense. You know,
I'm sorry to cut you. That patrial law didn't have to apply to Rhodesia to give British people access to this.
it may have been intended.
I think it was intended for that.
It may have been intended to encompass them,
yes.
so that they could easily come.
And then,
Yeah, Ian Smith
that's
and
the one.
Kith and Kin.
That's
Remember
the
the
one.
Kith
That's the
and Kin point? Yes. Yeah. In fact, when I was a member of the Guyana Students Association, I wrote an article on this. I'm not going to bore you with the details of it, but I wrote an article, and the title of the article is "The Racist Immigration Bill." And that was, I was talking about these very points. I said, but time is against us. Now, coming now to the 2014 and which is the main focus of my presentation, you will see from the brochure that I handed out that approximately 12 million British citizens do not hold a British passport. 12 million people. Potentially, any of them can be challenged under this legislation. Show us your papers. Show me your papers. You don't look as if you are English. I want to see your papers. Have you got a right to be here? Have you got a right to stay in this country? Have you got a right to vote? Prove it. You prove it. We don't have to disprove it. You have to prove it. The onus is on the individual. Under this legislation, the onus is on the person to prove that they have a right. You see? Now, this is the problem.
That wasn't included those who came in by plane.
It includes everybody.
No. They had an entrance stamp in your passport.
Yeah, but if you haven't got the passport, my friend, Neil, if you haven't got the passport, if you've lost your papers, what's happened to some of these people? Some of them came in on their parents' passport.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Their parents have died or whatever. And the children have grown up now. Many of them are senior citizens. Senior citizens like us. Senior citizens like us. Okay, but they haven't got any documentation. Ladies and gentlemen, when I went to Guyana to work, as many of you know, I was in Guyana for 16 months. And I walked around Guyana with my passport in my pocket every day.
Which passport?
My British passport! If I had a Guyana passport, they might not let me back in. And not only that, to this day, I can show you now in my case, I've got a copy. I walk around with a photocopy of my passport picture page. Identity. If I'm challenged, I can prove my identity because I'm supposed to know a bit of law, right? And I know that I can be challenged at any time by someone from the UK Home Office, a police officer, or any other official. Can you prove that you have a right to be here? Well, this is a copy of my passport. The original passport is at home. You're welcome to come and have a look if you want to see the original. But, you know, the copy should be enough. Now, this is what the legislation makes us have to do. I'm going to... I was teaching at a college 3-4 years ago. And the administrator of the college said, the Home Office is sending some people in. They're coming in. And they're coming into the classes to check on the students. I said, what? He said, yes. Expect them coming into your lecture. And these two women walked in, you know, practically barged their way in.
They asked to check your passport.
But they didn't ask me for mine, but they came and they checked the students. And I thought, this is the legislation. The legislation. This was in 2015, I think. It was about 3 years ago. Yes, it was after the 2014. I mean, maybe late in 2014 or early 2015. But anyway, it was part of this. They were checking. And I had one of my students who was a Bangladeshi who was taken into detention. He was taken into detention because he must have broken some of the conditions that were attached to his stay and so on. But it's serious. Serious, you see. I was so upset about all this that I decided that I would try and do something about it, what little I could. And I thought of sending a petition to Parliament for a change in this law, because this law is onerous, unfair, and unconscionable. It really is, as we've seen now from all the publicity. My good friend here will tell you, Aubrey will tell you about a case of a friend of his who's stranded in there, can't come back because he hasn't got enough proof of all the years that he's, they're asking people to prove every year that they have lived and worked in England. They have to provide pieces of paper for every year. How many of us have got pieces of paper for even this year, let alone for 50 years back? Come on. How fair is a law like that? How fair is it on people to have to ask people to prove that some of our people say, well, I worked in London Transport, or I worked in a hospital as a nurse for so many years. They must have record. I went to school here. I finished my education here. Can you go back and get all these records now? And so on. So there are serious problems. Persons have effectively had their rights eroded under the legislation. Landlords have been asked to police people. Landlords, have been asked to ensure that you get identity documents from your tenants to prove that they have a right to live in the UK. Employers, under this legislation, have been told you must get documentary evidence from your prospective employees to prove that they have a right to live and work in the UK. I can go on and on and on. Housing. People have lost their homes because they haven't been able to produce documentary evidence. They are regarded as undocumented. Healthcare. Look at the case of the man who was asked to pay £54,000 for his cancer treatment, and so on. I can go on and on and on and on, but I'll leave these points for our discussion later, in a few minutes. People have lost their pensions, their rights to benefits. They can't get, you can't get a driving license unless you can prove that you have a right to be here. You can't go and travel to throughout Europe. You can't go and live and work in Europe. Exercise your rights as an EU citizen. Freedom of movement for EU citizens. We all are British citizens. Freedom of movement. Those of us in the Windrush generation who are supposedly undocumented, can't prove, can't go anywhere, they can't travel. And if they travel, they can't get back in, as our friend, and so on. People have been arrested by not by police, you know, by Home Office officials. They have power under the act. That even more, well, they have more authority, shall I say. I'm choosing my words carefully here. They have even more authority than a police officer. A police officer, when he or she arrests you, eventually will have to charge you and take you to court. Right? And if you are to be deported, following a criminal offense, a court can make a recommendation for deportation. But the Home Office don't have to do that. They can break down your door, go in, you undocumented, put you, not yet, put you into detention. They detain you, like Yarl's Wood, and these places. Put people into detention. Right? With a view to deportation or removal. And they say, well, you're in detention and you can go of your own free will, or we can deport you. Right? Now I will close by drawing your attention to my petition. This is the website, but if you just Google Colin Bobb Semple petition, immigration, that it should come up, or Windrush petition Colin Bobb Semple, whatever. That link should come up. All right. So if you haven't yet signed my petition, I would be very grateful if you would sign it. The book to sign. The book to sign. I've got here links to my articles on the LinkedIn web, and also quoting Cordella Bob Stewart, who is director of the Black Solicitors Network. Cordella did a wonderful summary of the legislation and the Windrush points, which he published in The Voice, and I have actually put it on the LinkedIn website as well. I thank you for your attention, and I will now hand over very quickly to Brother Aubrey to tell us about his friend who's stranded in Guyana. Thank you.